All right. Um, I am out today, so a substitute is going to be showing this video to you. The homework last night was on big ideas, so hopefully you were able to finish that and get those correct. The homework for today is quite lengthy, so I'm going to try to keep these notes short so you have plenty of time to try to finish that. Just remember, if you happen to get done quickly, you need to find something quiet to do in your seat. Especially for my third period sophomores, you guys might need to finish the assignment from yesterday. All right, so we're going to start out by reviewing what we did yesterday because there are some of these on today's homework paper. So please write down these 4 problems. Please press pause while everyone writes those down. Okay, hopefully you paused that long enough to everyone to get these 4 problems down. Read the directions carefully. Solve each equation by taking the square root. This is a review from what we did yesterday. Today we are going to practice, which is also a review, solving by factoring. Okay, so when we solve taking the square root, the first thing we need to do is isolate whatever it is that's being squared. So here it's an n, here it's an x, here it's an x, and here it's a v. And a couple different things. Sometimes we're dividing, sometimes we are subtracting or adding. So that's what we're going to do, isolate the x squared here. So for tonight's homework, it's not on big ideas, so it's a little bit different. We are to the step where we need to take a square root of both sides. The square root of x squared is, maybe you didn't say it out loud, but hopefully you knew that that was x. And what is the square root of 18? Well, I want to remember it's plus and minus. 18 is not a perfect square root, so for now I'm going to write it down. But I need to factor this and see if there's any way that I can simplify it. That's how you'll get full credit for the homework assignment, is you'll have the simplified form, not just plus and minus square root of 18. So 2 times 9, 3 times 3, since that's a prime number, I want to bring it over to my prime factorization side. Well, the square root of 18 can be reduced. It would be reduced to 3 times the square root of 2. So your very final answer on a problem like this one, that's called number 9, is x equals positive or negative 3 times the square root of 2. All right, let's try another one. So maybe push pause here and solve number 10 on your own. Number 11 is very similar. I think the biggest issue here is we're reviewing how to simplify those square roots, which is what we did on Monday. So press pause maybe for 1 minute. Give them 1 or 2 minutes to do as many as they can with 10, 11, and 12. All right, I went ahead and finished these. So if you want to look, I don't know how many you had time to do. Maybe some of you only finished number 10, and maybe some of you finished all 3 of these. So on number 10, it was kind of cool because the square root of 16 is a perfect square. So as long as you remember to do the positive and the negative of that, you should have gotten the right answer there. Number 11 and 12, number 9 was the hardest. We had to simplify that square root of 18. But number 11, the square root of 6 cannot be reduced anymore. 6 is 2 times 3, so there's nothing doubling up. Also, number 12, the square root of 2 cannot be reduced. So again, here's some reminders. I guess if you were gone yesterday, this is a great reminder of, or not a reminder, a great crash course on what we did yesterday. Okay, here's a few more, same idea. So the review is solving by doing the square root. So let's just do a couple of these. There's some things that are overlapping. The biggest thing on these is we have to isolate the square root. I don't know why I said the square root. We have to isolate the term that is to the power of 2 before we can solve. So you can see there's some similar steps here. I'm going to do number 14. It looks kind of fun. So first thing I need to do is to get that k squared alone. Why don't you actually push pause, and I want you guys to write down number 14 and write down number 13. We'll just do 13 and 14. I guess if you know you're speedy quick, write them all down. But I'm only going to do 13 and 14. All right. Hopefully you pushed pause long enough for you to write down 13 and 14. Let's do 13 together. What should I do first? Well, I'm going to move this minus 9. Just kidding. All right. The next thing to do is to divide both sides by the negative 2. Oh, that's a good idea. We should get that out of the way. I don't have enough room to do it on that space anyway. So I'm glad that those negatives canceled out, because remember from yesterday, if it said b squared equals negative 32, I would have no solutions. This parabola is floating above or below the x-axis. But luckily they canceled out, so I'm going to do my next step. Now that I've isolated the thing that is squared, which is the b, I can square root both sides. The square root of b squared is b. All right, I'm pretty sure that 32 can be reduced. So I'm going to do my factor tower. Sometimes I go too fast. So I'm going to pause while you catch up with my factor tower. Anything that's doubled up can be evaluated because those represent the square root of 4, which is 2. The square root of 4, which is 2. So my final answer here is b is plus or minus 4 times the square root of 2. This is how your answers have to be evaluated. We're going to trade papers tomorrow and correct each other's on the homework. And if it doesn't look like this, you will get it marked wrong. Okay, on number 14, I want you to go ahead and push pause. Please solve 14. Again, if you are quick, do 14, 15, and 16, and then I'll show you the answer in a second. Okay, I showed you the work on number 14. The 3 is subtracted on both sides. The negative 8 is divided. I've got a 35 left over. The square root of 35, if I tried to factor that, it's just 5 times 7. So no repeating values, nothing can be evaluated. The square root of 35 is the simplest it can go. And then if you had time for 15 and 16, these are the answers that you should have gotten there. So that was a quick review of what we had done yesterday. Let's look at some new problems. Why can't we just solve these by doing the square root? How are they different from the problems that we were looking at yesterday? Well, the first thing that I'm noticing is they've got a middle term. They've got this x or n or whatever. So if I try to isolate the value that is squared, I'm going to have variables on the other side, and that just can't happen. So if you're wondering, I see a problem, how is the best way to solve it? These ones that are trinomials, the best thing to do is to factor. So if you had a teacher who never taught you the X method, I'm just sticking with it. It's the same thing you were taught, it's just another way of organizing it in your brain. So please write down for yourself. In the top piece, you put A times C. In the bottom piece, you're going to put B. And then I had one of my students do a problem for bell work, and I loved that she came in right away. If her lead coefficient was not a 1, she reminded herself right away that I'm going to have to divide that out. That's not always the case. Sometimes the lead coefficient is 1, and we don't have to do that step. But you don't even have to use the X method for those ones. All right, so please push pause. Everybody write down this number 1 and this number 2, please. All right, we're ready to go. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply A times C. And this one, 2 times 18 is 36. If you all don't have calculators, you may want to go grab them and push pause again. So remember, this is A, B, and C. So when I say A times C, that's what I'm talking about. And it is over on the board to the right. Standard form, f of x equals ax squared plus bx plus c. It's over there on the right by my monkey. All right, so A times C goes in the top piece, B goes in the bottom piece. If the substitute has not already handed out the lavender factor charts, please push pause and hand those out. We are going to be utilizing that today if you are not a very strong factorer. So if you can't think of things that go into 36 to add to be 15, I'm giving you a help today. You will come to your chart and you will go find the number 36. So we're trying to find things that multiply to be 36. Here's all of them. This is all of them. Which ones add to be 15? I hope you found it. 3 and 12. Those are the numbers that I'm going to pick. If you are not getting stuck on this step, if you're doing just fine thinking of them on your own, you don't have to use this method. Oops, I forgot to get my 2's ready. Okay, so the numbers that I found on my factoring table were 3 times 12 is 36, and 3 plus 12 is 15. All right, I can see that this can be reduced. I'm going to go ahead and reduce it. All right, so bottoms up. We take this bottom number and we put it first. And since it's a positive 3 on the top, I'll do plus 3. So one thing that I want to point out is, let's see if this will select for me. Oh, that didn't work. Trying to give myself some more room to write equals 0. This is supposed to say equals 0 out to the side. I might have to just squeeze it in over here. Oh, there's not enough room. Okay, because from here I have to use the zero product property. So I'm solving my zeros. This is how you solve the roots by factoring. Negative 3 equals 2x. Divide by 2, divide by 2. Okay, do the same thing for the x plus 6. Set it equal to 0. When y is 0, what is my x? These are your 2 roots when we solve by factoring. These are our 2 roots when you solve by factoring. Okay, let's try number 2. A times C, B on the bottom. This is going to remind me I have to divide by A before I'm done. All right, I'm trying to think of 2 things that multiply to be 84 and add to be 19. Multiply to be 84 and add to be 19. Here's all the things that multiply to be 84. Which ones add to be 19? Seven and 12. All right, is there any you can reduce? How about the 7/6? Nope. All right, so bottoms up. We have to bring down that equals 0 because this is the part where it says solve each equation. It doesn't say factor each equation. It says solve it. So once I've factored, I use the zero product property. I set each of these pieces equal to 0 and solve them. I'm probably getting too low for some of you to see. So I'm noticing these last 2 steps, are taking me a little bit of time. It's kind of messy. Is there a shortcut from our factoring x to the answers? So look at our factoring x and look at our final answers. Is there a shortcut? Is there anything that I can skip here? Well, this is a positive 3/2, and I went through all of this work just to get to negative 3/2. This was a positive 6, and I went through all of this work just to find out it's a negative 6. Did the same thing happen on the second problem? Yes. So, what I want you to do moving forward, which I should have mentioned this before. Step number 1, please check and make sure if there's any greatest common factors that can come out of the problem, either with variables or with the numbers. We haven't had that occur yet, but you should always check. Step number 2, you should factor. So step number 3, instead of setting them equal to 0, our answers are going to be opposite our mystery numbers. So for example, if we had a 5/6 and a 2, then our solutions would be negative 5/6 and negative 2. If that's confusing to you, and you have a hard time memorizing that, set them equal to 0 and solve them. Okay, I'm just going to do two more. One thing I want to mention, so I hope you guys didn't write this down. I already forgot what I was doing. Okay, let's do number 3. But please write 3n squared plus 4n equals negative 1. Before we check for a greatest common factor, before we even get started factoring, it must be all of your stuff equal to 0. On all of my examples, it was. And then I was checking the answer key for the homework. And on the bottom, like 6 or 7 problems, maybe even more than that, they start out more like this. It's not equal to 0. It's equal to something. So step number 1, I need to 0 out that side. It has to be a 0 in order for us to solve by factoring. Okay, push pause. Please go and solve this on your own. All right. Hopefully you had enough time to solve that one. And you notice I used the shortcut. So step number 1, I solved, or pre-1, solved for 0. Step number 2, I checked to make sure, is there a greatest common factor? No, 3, 4, and 1 do not have a greatest common factor. I set up my factoring x. I found that 3 and 1 multiply to be 3 and add to be 4. There is some simplifying here, and then I skipped right to the opposite step. My answers are the opposite of these magical numbers that I found when I was factoring. All right. I can do number 8. Please write down number 8. While I'm writing these down again. Okay, number 1, is it already solved for 0? Yes. Number 2, is there a greatest common factor with 2x squared and x? Yes. Because there's no c value, ax squared plus bx, there's no c, or it's a 0. So I can factor out an x. If this happens to you and you don't have a c value, please don't go down to the x step. I don't have an A or a B or a C anymore. I can use the zero product property to find my two roots. Here is one of the roots. Here is another of the roots. Slightly different problem. Even though the directions say solve by factoring, that is what I did here. That's the factoring step. I don't have to find these magic numbers because I already, by factoring out that x, I am factoring. I'm done. And I set them equal to 0 and I can solve. And there's no shortcut on this one. Okay, I think that I hope you're ready to go. Your homework, like I said, is quite lengthy. The notes have only been 20 minutes. You should have about 40 minutes left to solve them. Good luck.